Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Hypnovision Studios. I am your host, Nicholas. And today, the topic is Om. And as you can hear in the background, that is an Om chant. And the YouTube channel is Meditative Minds if you want to go check them out. If you're new here, thank you for stopping by. And if you hear anything that you like, please make sure you do subscribe. And if you're returning, thank you for coming back. So as I said, today's topic is Om. And I figured I would just kind of go off the top of my head because that seems to work best for me at times. I was thinking about the word Om. We hear it in chants, but we also know the word from electricity, oftentimes associated with speakers and things like that. How many ohms is this set up? 8 ohms, 4 ohms, 2 ohms. So there's a level of resistance that is measured by the ohms. And I was listening to William Donahue recently, and he was talking about the word Om. He was talking about the chants. And it really got me thinking, because the last video that I did was on the Christ within and the light and how the sunlight affects our pineal gland. So my mind during meditation started wondering, how are these things related? So how are we seeing the word Om in association with electricity? And then we have Om chants. If you know anything about ancient civilizations, then you know that chants, there was no words. There was only frequencies and vibrations. So we understand that ohms are associated with speakers, and speakers do reproduce sound. So there's got to be something to this, right? Well, when you start looking at the symbolism of Om, it actually brings you back to the Ankh, which is an Egyptian symbol that has a lot of mystery around it. There is all kinds of mystery with the Ankh. Now, if you look it up, the Ankh, or Key of Life, is an ancient Egyptian hieroglyph symbol used to represent the word for life, and by extension as a symbol of life itself. The Ankh has a T-shaped handle topped with a droplet-shaped loop. It was used in writing as a trilateral sign representing the sequence of three. So when you get to looking into this further, you understand that the straight bar represents the male, the loop represents the female, and when those two come together, there's the 3. So 3 is such a powerful thing throughout civilization, and especially when you get into numerology, 3 is a power number. 3, 6, and 9 is what Nikola Tesla told us if we wanted to understand the keys to the universe. So how does Om tie back into all this stuff? Well, if you start looking at the symbolism for the female, when you separate the Ankh, the Om symbol looks just like that. And that's very interesting. If we measure resistance by Om in electrical terms within physical things like wires and speakers, how does that equate to the body? Well, if you are chanting Om, you are creating a vibration within your body that actually comes outward, so from the inside out. And that is symbolism at its finest, because the depiction of the Ankh would be receiving the straight shaft, or the phallic, and that is reproduction of life, and it is represented as life, the key of life. So resistance. What is resistance? Perhaps resistance is your higher self, the parts of you that you resist allowing to come to the surface. Well, you could see it that way. There's another way you could see it. You could see it through the symbolism or the viewpoint of a fallen angel. Because if the phallic if the male shaft has to enter into the female, you ascend and descend. And we know this because of the colostrum. That is the Christ oil that circulates in our body. We also know that there's the Kundalini. So if we're talking about ohms and we're talking about resistance, we must be talking about the nervous system, the tree of life within the human body. Now, that starts to make these things fit together in the puzzle without trying to force them. So resistance can be seen in many ways, but it can also be seen through the lens of the nervous system itself. When we have a thought that we feel we should carry out, and when we resist, that electrical current flowing in our body is the emotional energy in motion. Energy in motion. So we are talking about the nervous system. We are talking about emotions. You know, we are actually talking about the electrical charge of the body. That is very interesting, because let's pull back for just a minute. If Mother Earth is considered the female, right? Mother Earth, and the sun is what gives light to the world, gives life to the world. Without the sun, everything on Earth dies. So there must be a correlation. We all know that the sun causes things to grow. Interestingly enough, when we're talking about electricity, electrons are emitted from the sun and protons are emitted from the sun. And what happens when the light hits the earth? Things have photosynthesis. And photo is in the word photosynthesis. How do we get images in our imagination? Photosynthesis can help create photos in the imagination, which is the image. That is very deep. But it's like one of those aha moments, like, wow, how come I didn't see that before? So, if you have, for example, a pineal gland that is calcified, then the light from the sun is not giving you the full benefits because it is cloudy. And that would make sense if you have cloudy thoughts, if you are confused about things, if you find yourself constantly going and feeling like instead of you being in charge of your life, everything around you is dictating your life for you. You're not able to sit down and think clearly because your vision of the image is blurry. It's like looking through a foggy window and can only make out just the surface level of these photos. But as you clarify your pineal gland, as you detoxify your body, as you learn what ohms really means, not in the terms of speakers, but in terms of the body, in terms of the nervous system, we can get into fight or flight. Our nervous system can flip just like that. And more times than not, we can often create snapshots of those images and the emotional state that we were in, and we attach ourselves to those states. In one way, that's like an anchor. Because if you understand self-hypnosis or hypnosis in general, then you can learn to reverse that process of letting things go, detaching. That is the art of detachment. So guys, I know I'm rambling a little bit, but this is really off the top of my head, and I'm thinking about all the content that I made in the last year and the internal struggle I felt, like knowing that I am doing the right thing, but being honest with yourself and being more honest with your words when you speak them outwardly. There is a consequence that comes with that. The more honest that you are, the more it offends certain people. Now, there's no directional aim at me saying that. That is a general thing. Anybody can experience that. The more honest you become, the more people you will offend, and more than likely it is the people closest to you, because birds of a feather stick together. People who are alike think alike. And if there is fixed mindsets and you start to break away from a mindset and you start to become really honest about that mindset, it might cause resistance. Resistance to the OHM, resistance to clarifying what it is in this image. What is the imagination in this moment? How am I perceiving based on the emotional state of my nervous system? Now, here's some interesting things that I have learned on my journey over the last year of producing content, doing research, meditation, and journaling. The OHM and resistance, the nervous system, it is all energy. So our DNA is always depicted in a spiral, right? Also, the Kundalini energy, when you look at diagrams of that, it is always depicted as two snakes in a spiral, and they meet, and in the Bible it's depicted as an actual physical tree and a snake and a forbidden fruit being bitten from. Well, suppose that was just nothing but an illustration that was understood from the inside first, but also generations of these type stories being told and passed down through different cultures. The only way you can peel back all these layers and get to the truth is to go into meditation, is to quieten the mind, and that takes practice if you've never done it. So what I've done over the past year is pretty much make content as I go along, as I discover these things, as I come across these things, and I start to gain new understandings of things. I find those things to be inspirational because it is part of the learning process for me, but it is also an awareness thing of knowing that there are other people out there like me that did not know some of this stuff. There are other people out there like me that are seeking for answers, and just maybe how I describe how it related to me helps them to understand something within them, and that makes it worthwhile. So the meditation, you can see meditation as receiving, right? Because if the pineal gland is receiving the light from the sun above, and it is cosmic energy, we know that there's data within our DNA. If our DNA is on the surface of something, they can match that DNA. It's like a signature. So if it's like a signature, you could see that as a soul signature in a way. The cosmic energy imprinting through photosynthesis, creating an image, and then the mind trying to clarify what that image is and take action from that. The problem is, just like the depiction of the physical tree with a snake and a physical bite in the apple, that is a break in the energy flow. If your pineal gland is calcified, as I said, it's like looking through a foggy window. Also, if energy is trying to flow, there is more resistance. So if there is resistance, then you're not getting the full picture. That can be seen like static in the old school TVs that had rabbit ears, and you would have to fine-tune the picture to clarify and get rid of static. There's so much to this stuff that when you boil it down and pull all the layers back, it's like, wow, like, how did all this stuff connect? How did I know this stuff? And it didn't come from a book from the outside. It didn't come from over here in this place or over there in that place. It's meditation. It really is. The more you go through this process, the more you practice, the more you start to understand what it is you're seeing in your imagination. That is the image. And the electrical side of us, which is the nervous system, if we are in that fight or flight mode, if we have certain attachments to memories of the past. Those things are like anchors that kind of hold us down. And you can really start to understand how through the generations, man has really lost its way in a lot of regard. But man has also tried to control, which we shouldn't do. I'm not going to say that you should or shouldn't do X, Y, and Z in your life. You're your own person. But trying to control is resistance. And that was a hard lesson for me to learn. But once I started seeing it through meditation that way and allowing those attachments that I used to hold on to through my memories, these would be the things, the hurts and the pains and the traumas. Kind of like I said in the last video with the Christ conscious stuff, healing the inner child. Those things create like anchor points that really bind us to a certain mindset, a certain frequency within our mind. Because just like the OHM, there are different frequencies. And we know that speakers reproduce sound. We know through electronics that you can adjust the pitch. You can speed things up, slow things down. The waveforms of all this stuff does correlate with the mind. And in the last video, I was using a delta wave, which is one of the lower waves. It is a very slow moving wave. And it puts you into almost the REM state. And if you're able to be conscious, slow your brain down to match those waves, you can gain a very different understanding of the imagination. I spent a lot of time asking, and it's just like those pictures you see of somebody pulling up a curtain trying to figure out what's on the other side. Where does the imagination begin? Where does it end? It's like trying to visualize the entirety of space, knowing that it is ever expanding. There is not an edge to it that we know of. That almost hurts the mind to think about it. So when there's things that we do not know, we have been conditioned to fear those things and not think those things and not go near those things. And when they are forbidden, it makes us wonder, why is it forbidden? It almost seems like it was on purpose. But if you take that same symbolism of the snake and the half-bitten apple and you repair the image in the imagination, how do you do that? You have to return to absolute zero. You have to return to the foundation of all creation. And how do you do that? First, you must quiet the mind. Then you must learn to be still and know that I am God. Not me personally, but that is the saying, I am God. Know that I am God. That means inside of you, the living tree of life, you are experiencing life. You descended from the Creator. Descended from the Creator. So, the DNA, the representation of the male and the female, and the energies involved in that, and the Ankh, the Om, resistance, photosynthesis, image, imagination. Now you can see how all this stuff, when you wipe it all away, and imagination is not the programming of the mind, the experience that you have had on this physical earth. Because when you were born, you didn't have thoughts. You were just pure manifestation of life. And your brain, your body, and everything else was functioning automatically. Nobody was telling you to breathe. Nobody was telling you to move your arm. Nobody was telling you to suck on your thumb. Nobody told you to cry. Nobody told you to poop in your diaper. It wasn't until you started learning from the outside that you began to have thoughts and patterns. And in my last video, I referred to that as rings on a tree, expanding. So when we go back through the imagination, right? It's like we have pushed ourselves like those rings of a tree all the way to the outer edge. And then to return home, we have to go through all those layers of the imagination, of those rings of the tree, all the way back to the core. That is where the purest of imagination is, protected inside of the nucleus. Think about this for a minute. the girl with the snake, Adam and Eve. Think about this. What if it wasn't A-D-A-M? What if it was A-T-O-M? Atom. We know that the numbers for atom is 666, and we know that is traditionally known as the mark of the beast. That would be the flesh side of the body. So, what causes it to be the beast? Well, not understanding emotions, being in fear, being on the negative side of the nervous system for long periods of time can actually make you numb to how we treat other people, to how we perceive life, to how we perceive ourselves. So symbolically and through the images, we can tell that their story through generations has been distorted, much like a photo through a foggy window. That's very interesting. And it's almost comical when we stop and think about how serious we take some of these things. For example, there's a lot of things in the Bible that I see other people take quite serious, quite literal, and they hold this certain definition to a particular passage or something like that. And come hell or high water, you're going to understand it from that point of view. But what if everybody perceives things how it should be perceived to them? I once pondered, how do you know that something was inspired by the Holy Ghost? Well, the red writing in the Bible, of course, but how do we know that is even correct? Who turned that writing red? Well, if I was a writer and I was encoding stuff in a book and I was telling parables and I was passing down information, if I wanted at some point to control a population, then I might just intentionally encode things in the Bible. I might just intentionally hide things in the Bible. I might intentionally use numerology in the Bible, astrology in the Bible. I might intentionally take bits and pieces from other religions and put them in the Bible. So, just like in my last video, the Christ conscious, opening the Akashic records, is cracking that seal to the core of the soul, liberating from the box. We know through astrology that Saturn and the rings and also the North Pole of Saturn, pentagon, hexagon, it doesn't really matter, does it? Because if you go and do the symbolism, you will understand what the black cube is. And if you understand symbolism, you open the doorway to a very, very deep treasure trove of understanding and knowledge. And that is why they wanted to forbid us from knowing this stuff. Think about it. Just think about it. Why is it forbidden? If you were trying to control others, then keeping them ignorant is how you control them. Because when they don't know any better, they can't do better. And if they can't do better, then they are stuck. So, the symbolism of the tree, the symbolism of the serpents, now we can start to look at the other side, which is the Kundalini, which is more of the feminine aspect of things. So in my mind, as I'm sitting here talking, I am thinking Christ conscious. I am thinking Kundalini energy. They are somewhat interchangeable in some readings and documentations that I have read. But the way I see it, the Father, the Son, that would be representation of the male energy. The Kundalini, female, that is the feminine energy. So, if you have resistance, then the flow is slowed down. And if you have resistance, that coal cannot climb all the way back up, ascend back up. If you understand energy and you understand our DNA, the spiral, that life has this natural spiral effect to it. The galaxy has this whole swirl to it. You start to understand the symbolism, the pineal gland, when you shut off one side of the hemisphere between the two brains. Now think about this. I said a while ago that we were talking about the nervous system because you have the negative and the positive side of the nervous system. And when you starve one side and shut it off, now that tree is not getting all the nutrients that it needs. It is not getting all the grounding, all the protons, all the electrons. You are starting to shut off different parts of the body, and we know that people used to live a lot longer. So it kind of traps you inside of your own body. And if you understand maritime law, then you would understand the whole vessel concept, that you are a vessel. They refer to you as a corpse. It is just insane when you start breaking down all these parables and word plays and symbolism, and you start to get to absolute truth and how it really relates to you as a person. And that is the whole purpose of me making these videos. It's not for me to get likes. It's not for me to get notoriety, because again, the more honest you become, the more you offend people you know. So there's also unintended consequences of doing things like this when it comes to what you call forbidden knowledge or going outside of the norms. Now you are an outcast. Now you are a black sheep. Now, because you are telling the truth, people will have to shut you up. That is a very real thing that some people experience. But I also want to go back to the Om for just a minute before I end this video. Chanting Om creates a vibration within the body, allowing us to disengage the mind. And also in that process of disengaging the mind comes detachment. Why? Because it is the mental thought forms that create the prison that holds that energy within our mind. Something else is very interesting is we have 12 cranial nerves. We have the positive and negative of the nervous system. There's 12 disciples. There's Jesus at the Last Supper. So if you have 12 plus Jesus, that's 13. And 1 plus 3 equals 4. We have 4 seasons. And if you count as above, so below, as within, as without, that's 1, 2, 3, 4. Fourth house, meditation is quite literally life-changing if you haven't figured that out by now. Because opening the mind, opening the other hemisphere, opening up the pineal gland so that energy can flow, because energy always wants to balance itself back out. And if you practice meditation long enough, you can begin to normalize and stabilize your life, because your energy, your emotions are not like ping pong balls. Because when you resist, you create back pressure. And when you create back pressure, sooner or later, that pressure is going to build and it is going to break through something. And not in a good way. Because you can hold emotions until finally you have a meltdown. You either go ballistic and angry and berserk, or you have a meltdown and tears and crying uncontrollably. And neither one of those are good, because one, that's fire and water. So the balance between that we find through meditation. And if we understand that meditation is receiving, right? Giving and receiving. But first we need to do that with what we call God, what we call the universe, what we call source, whatever it is that we look to on the inside. Here's something that I would suggest, that we stop thinking of it being a separate outside entity or being from us, because we are all made from the same things. So, Nikola Tesla was right. If you want to understand the universe, 3, 6, and 9 is key. Because you start to look at the Ankh and you realize the electrical aspects of this. And you will start to understand that he was right. And because he was right, it makes sense that they tried to shut him up. It makes sense that so many of his inventions went missing. There's a lot of truth that has been hidden in plain sight right in front of us. But the way it was scattered and the way that things have been passed down, twisted and distorted, have caused us to lose our way. And that is because of control, greed, things like that. It's quite interesting and things that I find to be fascinating to learn, to release, and let go of. Because I don't want to live in the past. I don't want to live traumatized. I don't want to live thinking that there's a devil that is going to poke me to death when I die. Actually, before I had my awakening, much of my previous life felt that way. Living hell on earth. And that is actually highlighting the power of the mind when we don't know that we can change it. And that happens through the subconscious. That happens from the inside out. We have to strip away everything from the outside. We cannot cross the veil with any kind of baggage. We do not get to take anything with us except our essence. And with that, guys, I will see you on the next video.